righty. Well, everyone, you might notice we are one person short here on our end. Unfortunately, Basecamp is sick today, but we still have at least 3 people to fill the screen up, so you won't have to be bored by just me. Today, we actually have with us 2 folks from the Subaru LNT team. And if you don't know what LNT means, it means leave no trace. And if you've ever backpacked, you should know what LNT is. And if you don't, after this episode, you will be a semi-professional in LNT practice. So let me introduce our guest speakers today. First of all, we have Elena Miyasato and Jesse Valu. I just forgot it in the 30 seconds after you told me. Valu. And no Jesse, you have a PhD, and I want to talk about that. That's one of the questions coming up. But y'all have been with LNT Subaru for about 2 years, and I would like you to kind of just give us your background on what you do at the Subaru LNT team and what your day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having us on today. Stoked to be out here. So myself and Elena are what's called a traveling team for Leave No Trace. So it's actually our job to drive around the country. We're on the road 12 or 11 months out of the year, and we are camping and spreading the knowledge on Leave No Trace, whether that's through dedicated workshops or outreach events or even producing social media content, online content. Our goal is to educate as many people as we can around this country on how to practice Leave No Trace.
Oh, I guess we could dive into kind of like our role for the organization is really to be the boots on the ground. So there is a organization working out of Boulder, Colorado, that develop a lot of the Leave No Trace practices, principles, and educational material that then we are the ones reaching people and having those daily conversations about the impacts that everyone's seeing as they recreate outside and what we can do to equip people with the best knowledge possible to take care of these spaces while enjoying them as well.
The boys in the lab cook up all the science and research behind Leave No Trace, and we have the opportunity to just kind of live the lifestyle. So we have the fun job out here.
Man, that's awesome. I did a lot of work for the government, and I feel like the best and the worst part of the job was working with people. It's great to be able to educate and see light bulbs come on. I guess for what I did, I usually had to be kind of like, I had to tell people, no, you can't do this. So a little bit more of a regulator. So that was the downside of it. But people really make the jobs worth the while, don't you think?
Definitely, yeah. And I think, Leave No Trace can also fall into that trap of being kind of, if you're not careful, you can start going out there and telling people what to do. And that's not our job really out there, and something that we want to avoid and try to encourage everyone to avoid. But yeah, it's really those conversations and those light bulb moments where you're talking to someone about their trash, or why you might want to pack out your orange peels instead of toss them on the ground. And when they have that, wow, I had never thought about that. I'm actually going to change how I behave out here. That's when it feels really gratifying, definitely.
Before we get into the nitty gritty, do you feel like LNT is, if it ever was this way, is it moving away from like a position of shame and more towards like education and like, hey, like just do this if knowledge is power, and just treat the environment with respect?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, we have recognized that people aren't going to care about these outdoor spaces unless they have good experiences outdoors in the first place. And so our priority really is to get people excited to be outside first and foremost. And then we can come back around and talk about all of the ways that we connect to these natural ecosystems and how we can be a part of them and kind of take care of them at the same time. So we're not living separate lives necessarily. And we benefit so much from spending time in the outdoors that we certainly don't want to shame anyone or make people feel uncomfortable or targeted when we're trying to impose wisdom. We're not coming from this lofty, or we try not to come from this lofty kind of idealistic perspective, but rather we want to meet everyone where they at and give tangible steps to improve, that they can practice as best they can. And we want to reach as many people as possible, kind of casting a wide net so that we're encouraging people to then share what they learn and get excited about it, and they can spread the knowledge exponentially.
Yeah. And I would hope to say that, Leave No Trace never really was coming from a place of shaming, but I'm not sure that would be totally correct, unfortunately. But we definitely, as an organization, have been making that concerted effort to try to shape how we communicate and also how the community communicates about Leave No Trace. And it's not just us, there are many other organizations out there that are really championing, that idea of inclusivity in the outdoors. And especially in the digital era when everything is anonymous, and it can really, fall back onto that, shaming mentality. So I think it is something that you have to, practice consciously every single day.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the past, I have definitely taken up the mantle of being pissed off at people for leaving trash all over the place. I think I've had to kind of readjust my mindset on that too, because like I grew up in Georgia, and one of the idioms I grew up with is that you attract more flies with honey than vinegar. And I mean, it's true. Like, be sweet, be kind, educate. So, no, it's awesome what y'all do.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
I want to get into a little bit more about y'all before we get to like the LNT stuff. And Elena, you've hiked the AT, not the entire thing, but a big chunk, about 300 miles. That is significant. Come on. Do you want to talk about what chunk that was, if it was in different sections, kind of all over the trail, and if you ever want to actually hike the whole thing?
Yeah, I would love to hike the whole thing, probably at this point by section. And so I think I'm about 14% of the way, 15% of the way there. I went to school in South Carolina for undergrad, and so I have almost covered the entire North Carolina Tennessee border, um, and have spent a lot of time in that southern region. I have also done the Shenandoah section of the AT, and that was what started it all for me. I went on a backpacking trip through the backpacking club at my high school, and it was over spring break. It was brutally cold, still snow on the ground, and I was not ready for it at all. But after spending 7 days out there, just seeing cascading tree covered mountains and hills, and feeling like I could um, take care of myself just with the things on my back. I was hooked after that.
Nice. Whenever you got done, did you feel like you wanted to liquidate half of your worldly possessions?
Yes, I was
Yeah.
like, I don't need anything.
Like, I need a pot, a pan, a toilet, and running water, and that's about it.
If
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
If that, yeah. And so you both hiked and I'm probably going to mispronounce this too, the Kalalau Trail in Kauai.
Yeah, the Kalalau.
The Kalalau. Okay.
We did. And
Talk about it.
sure, yeah. So this is on the northern shore of Kauai, what's called the Nepali coast. I guess it's a relatively short in terms of you expert backpackers. I'm much more of a beginner, but it's at about an 11-mile stretch, so 22-mile out and back. And that might not sound like a lot, but to me that was no joke. And I think to most people, it's a pretty serious hike because it is probably one of the most dangerous, but also one of the most beautiful hikes, at least in the U.S., that I've ever been on. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, the terrain is just following along this. It's pretty much cliff faces. It's the side of the island that is just a sheer drop off into the ocean, and the mountains are so wet and so lush, but really really steep. And so we're just hugging the coastline, but still pretty high in elevation. And so we were there in February, which is the wet season in Hawaii, and it rained a lot. It was like sporadic rain, but we were hiking in our rain jackets and seeing rainbows pretty much around every corner. And the rain also meant that there were a handful of big river crossings. They're normally smaller river crossings, but you had to have poles with you, and somebody before us had laid like a bamboo rod to kind of grasp to, but we had our shoes off. We were about thigh high in some parts, and it made for a really good adventure. Um, when when we got to the beach at the end of the first day, this beach is only accessible by this trail, and so you really feel the reward of hiking in and seeing maybe 4 other people when we were there, because it is a permitted hike. And though, at least in the Kalalau Trail's case, there are helicopters flying around because it's the beautiful Nepali coast of Kauai, and maybe some boats passing by, but you really feel like you are out on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's like I would say of the Colorado Trail that the constant view that you have is kind of like just as good or better than, you know, a singular view that you would hike on any other trail in the country. And this is something that's constant. You know, you're up there, 60-foot cliff edge, rainbows, beautiful ocean below you, and the actual beach that is the actual destination, the Kalalau Beach, is, yeah, really, really sacred, really special place for sure.
Yeah, though you can't get in the water. At least in the season that we were there, the tides are really strong, and the surf is really rough. So I think Jesse walked up to the beach, and before even getting within 10 feet of the actual water, started sinking into the sand. And the sand looks solid, but because the waves are stirring it so much, it's just like a liquid. And he was like sinking in up to his knees, and I was worried that he's just going to get sucked into the ocean.
Yeah, that was my quicksand experience for sure.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? Were you like, oh, holy shit, I should get out of this, or I kind of want to stay?
I understand why there are signs that say don't go in the water. And, you know, that from an LNT standpoint, sometimes people have to learn from themselves or understand why they should or should not go in something before they actually, you know, listen to that messaging out there. But, you know, my experience on this trail was, you know, I'm much more of an entry level backpacker than Elena is. And so I think I've never been more covered in mud in my entire life. And I think I was just extremely happy to be there once I finally was in the ocean at the end of this trail, because it was slick. You know, you're hiking on 45-degree grade sideways with no railing going down to the ocean, and kind of crawling halfway through it. I think there's actually a section of it called Crawler's Ledge that is, you know, 2-mile section where the best recommendation is to just crawl it. I'm sure we're not doing this the best justice to describe this to any listeners. I would encourage you to maybe give a quick Google of what this actually looks like, because our words are definitely not doing justice here.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I just wish it was a little bit longer. That's all.
Crawler's Ledge came at around mile 7, which there's a camp or place that you can camp around 5 miles in, and we had met some people who turned back at Crawler's Ledge. They're like, it's too slippery, we cannot keep on going all the way to the beach, and they were really bummed about it. And we decided that we would at least scope it out to see if it was passable by our standards. And we get up to this area, and it's basically a notch in the cliff face. So it's cut out, and you're underneath the cliff, and you're staring straight down into the ocean. And it's windy. It was raining. I had my hiking poles with me, but they were almost a hindrance because I was like, I don't want to be just touching the ground with two appendages. Like I had to have a hand and both my feet touching at all times, because my backpack felt like a sail as well. And so we took it slow the first time headed to the beach. But what we didn't realize was that after Crawler's Ledge, I believe it was after, there was a big mudslide area that had just wiped out all the vegetation. It's this really slick red mud, kind of like clay. And when it gets wet, it's just a slip and slide. And that was the real challenge. Was we had gone through Crawler's Ledge, we're like in the clear, but there's about a 45-degree angle of just sheer slick red mud and a little bit of root from some of the plants hanging out that people had obviously held onto for dear life so that they didn't slide all the way down into the ocean. And at this time of year, you had to have micro spikes with you or you would end up in the ocean.
Oh my gosh.
So Jesse had recently invested in some good micro spikes, and they were industrial strength, and he traversed this section with no problem. I, on the other hand, had old micro spikes that I had for probably 10 years or so, and they were just for like walking on ice on the sidewalk, not staying attached to this mountain. And so I was like just stabbing in my hiking poles, hoping that they would hold, and I was really, really counting on some friction to get me across. And
were they more like nano spikes, or were they the actual like half-inch to an inch deep spikes?
Jesse's was about
I had about the deep ones, which were really needed in that kind of mud. I think Elena's were more on the nano scale.
Almost like yak tracks, but a little different.
Yeah. Although, if anyone has ever used these in the mud, you'll start to see them getting caked to a point where they're no longer very effective, regardless of the depth that you have. So you do have to keep cleaning them out relatively frequently.
Yeah, mine slipped off my boots without me even noticing.
Yeah, I think we had to backtrack about a mile because of Elena to find Elena's spikes in a mud puddle somewhere.
They weren't cut out for this. Which, on the way back, there wasn't as much rain, so the terrain dried out a lot, and it was a whole different experience. It was a cakewalk compared to the way there.
Yeah, so if you're looking to do it, I think February is definitely a rainy season. It's much easier to get a permit at that time of year, but I think that there is a reason for that. It's definitely a little bit more challenging. Although the rain is never too much of a bother out there besides it being muddy. It only rains for about, 5 minutes every day or so. Just kind of rains pretty intensely.
Sounds about like a Colorado summer storm right there. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Real quick, can you speak to the wildlife out there? What's the fauna look like? I've never been to Hawaii, so I have no idea.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, it's incredibly lush. I would say Kauai is kind of the backpacker's island of Hawaii if you're going to go anywhere. It is.
It's considered the garden island. There's a lot more natural preserves there and less development. It's less touristy. And when we got to the trail, immediately started looking for bananas. There were some bananas around. There were coconuts everywhere. And we found some lime trees once we got to the beach. But the primary, fauna were goats down on the beach that were in like huge hordes.
Yeah. So non-native goats and non-native chickens, I'd say, were the primary wildlife that we saw out there.
There were also hogs
Yes.
that we didn't see, but there are some gates and fences to kind of keep them out or in, I'm not sure. And at the end of the beach, there's a big waterfall that in the pool at the base of the waterfall lie 4 pairs of mating frogs, like giant fist-sized frogs, and they were having the time of their lives. This is the same waterfall that you get fresh water from as well, that you refill. So it was a interesting sight to see.
Yeah, we've heard stories of people doing a more kind of sustenance hike where they are actually hunting the goats who are on the trail. So that, I think, does go on there as well in some cases. But from a leave no trace perspective, I'm not sure that's something that we would encourage. Similarly, we did unfortunately experience kind of a leave no trace case study out there, because there is a lot of forgotten and left behind gear at the beach out there, which was a little bit unfortunate to see. So even people with the leaving out a propane tank or a bag of rice with a handwritten note that says take it if you want it. That ultimately is still something that I think we would hopefully encourage people to try to pack out everything that they are bringing in there, because that stuff does start to build up, and with the weather and out there, it kind of all rots pretty quickly and starts feeding the goats, essentially, more than is a helpful asset to any other hikers coming through.
Yeah, Jesse's being very gracious. It was a real bummer to see like big piles of camping equipment left behind by people, and it makes sense in some ways that this is kind of like a destination hike, and so people buy equipment just for this one experience and then feel like they've completed their experience, so can leave it there. But it does take away from the experience of all of those to follow, and it's really hard to get all the chairs and tents and leftover bags of food out of this beach, because you have to either pull a helicopter in or bring a boat up to a beach that might not be very safe for boats to land on, or people have to hike out with it. And so we tried to take out as much stuff as we could, specifically the fuel canisters, because those were a little more packable for us. We could fit them in our bags, but it was definitely an effort needed to take out a lot of the other things.
Gotcha. Have y'all heard about, I don't know which island it's on, but it's some trail that it's actually closed, but people illegally hike it, and they are rescued quite often on this trail. And Hawaii has just had enough, and so they're gonna disassemble the very large staircases that like comprise the trail. Have you heard about that?
Oh, no, I don't think so. There were a couple trails that that have experienced washouts, or they maybe blew up on social media but were never a designated trail. I think that that's happening a lot in Hawaii, unfortunately, but I'm not sure exactly what trail you're talking about.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, that's a story that we hear all across the country through our travels as well, is, areas that have not been intended to be as heavily used as they are, or even be used at all, are suddenly discovered, and they're communicated with not the right education surrounding that communication, and then that leads into these kind of unfortunate situations.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. I don't know why people just can't, I don't know, do the homework and just do better. But that's a platform that I don't want to stand on right now. What I do want to get into is, do y'all have a drink? Because I have one, and I just saw you pull one up.
We do, yeah.
Oh yeah,
we each have a drink. Yeah. So what are you drinking, Elena?
Oh, I have a taro flavored bubble tea, which is my drink of choice.
Yeah.
Look at those bubbles.
Lovely. I saw the purple color, and I couldn't tell if it was like your glass or the actual beverage. Now I know.
And I'm drinking a Deschutes Tropical Fresh IPA. I think it's pretty appropriate. We're like right on the Deschutes River at the moment in Bend, Oregon. And it's feeling like the first day of summer out here for us, at least. So nice tropical vibe going on with this.
I love it. Do you like any other Deschutes beers like the porter?
I do. I'm actually not the biggest IPA guy in generally. Um, but when in Bend, as they say, I think there's kind of what is it, the highest density of breweries in a single town out here. So it's kind of
Per
the thing.
capita.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing out here. Definitely enjoying it while I'm here.
This is a local Colorado beer. I mean, when in a state that's a beer mecca, why not? Same as you in Oregon. This is from Ska Brewery. It's a collab they did with the Animist Chocolate Factory. So this is a peppermint milk stout, and I'm super in love with this. This is the third 4-pack we've bought of this. Well, I mean it's seasonal, so it's about to go out of style.
Yeah, I was like,
I
that
love
sounds
it.
like a Christmas beer or something.
Right, or perfect for a snowy day.
Yeah, true.
As long as we're still having snowstorms, the dark beers keep flowing.
Still winter. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't actually hit our true summer until like mid to late May, June. It's crazy out here.
If that. I remember we were out in Colorado last summer and getting a lot of nice hailstorms coming in August there.
Dude, those happen in June, July, August. Doesn't matter. Cool. So we got our beverages in tow. Now let's get into a little bit more of the LNT dialogue. But the last question I had is, Jesse, you have a doctorate. What do you have a doctorate in? Talk to me about this.
I do, yeah. So I'm not a medical doctor. I have a PhD in what's called design science. And so a fair warning, if I talk about design science, it's when we start approaching some kind of abstract territories with the subject matter here. So I might be making some broad statements, but to briefly kind of summarize what this is, design is the act of creating something that will solve a problem. And then science is, applying some sort of systematic procedure to that. So it's kind of the general way of how do you create, general procedures for creating. So you're creating a tool to create. So say, I asked you, okay, your task is to design a product that will help you pack out your poop on the trail. What do you do? What's step one? What's step two? How can you then generalize those steps for maybe a different product? How can you optimize that? And really what you'll find is that in doing that, you need a lot of different expertise. Like you need to know how to maybe, needs find, interview people to see, how can I improve on, what's currently being done? How can I understand what problems you have when you're, having to pack out your poop? And then maybe you need to prototype. You need to know how to build something. You need to be an engineer. So, the real magic of design science is trying to, not necessarily make one an expert of any single discipline, but make you an expert at working between disciplines to really build those solutions. And, the ultimate objective of this field is really to kind of address what are known as wicked problems. So like a wicked problem is, one of the larger problems that, plague our world that don't have any sort of conventional solutions. So like world hunger or climate change or things that no one discipline alone can solve those issues. So what we need is more people who can help facilitate, solution making between those disciplines and help bring designers and engineers together with, political scientists and, humanitarians and people working in those fields and help them, be efficient in creating those solutions. And, from a Leave No Trace standpoint, that does come in as well because we're, working at kind of at that intersection of, that education, that engineering, how do we build, our outdoor spaces to, better accommodate people. And then of course, how do we enforce those rules as well? So there's all these kind of different avenues that we can kind of try to build cultures of Leave No Trace. And so it really is a very interdisciplinary field.
Okay. Would you consider social, let me rephrase this, ecological injustice or ecological inequity a wicked problem?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, something that anything that you can say, I can't give you a solution in a single sentence of what this really is going to be without having massive consequences on some other area is going to be one of those wicked problems. So it's definitely something that ideally you can start to work to address.
I wonder if the question, what's for dinner or what do you want for dinner, is a wicked problem. It can be, depending.
Yeah. Yes.
One more question on this. What was your thesis about?
Yeah. So I wrote a dissertation on how to intertwine psychology and engineering, essentially, and mainly how do you build models of human physiology. So how do you build a model of your sweat, your heart rate, your muscle activity, to then inform specific engineering decisions, like a concrete engineering decision that would then, allow me to maybe optimize my product to make you feel the most calm or feel the most aroused. Because there's actually a ton of information you can glean about a person's, feeling from these very small measurements, right? Like, so just measuring micro changes to the amount of sweat that is on your skin, you can tell, a good index of maybe how stressed this person might be during this interaction. And then with that knowledge, you can then take that and translate that into something, very specific, like, okay, we need to make, this a little bit more stiff or a little bit more, forgiving for this person to then feel better about this interaction. And this is it's an interesting approach, because when you're measuring something from the body, you don't have to stop and say, okay, let's take a break. How did you like that? What were you feeling about that, product? You can instead just measure these as the interaction is occurring, so that you don't have to break that up, and you can see, okay, at this stage, this person was feeling good. Then they might started feeling a little bit stressed about this. So there's a lot more fidelity on the level of information that you can collect. And ultimately, when you're building a lot of products, there's a lot of time saved without having to stop and ask people things that generally they're bad at telling you. So people are very bad at saying what they like a lot of times, or what they dislike, or why they like it or dislike it. So when we can kind of take that away and just go off the body more, it can give us a lot of interesting insight.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like people, in my experience, people have been able to communicate what they do and don't like, but not the why. It's so funny that you mentioned that. People aren't able to, I guess, describe their feelings well. And maybe I'm getting more into like relationship communication, but I feel like that spills over into the everyday life as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, I totally hear what you're saying. Absolutely.
Whenever somebody says it's their gut instinct,
Yeah.
I do this a lot, where I just follow my gut, but I don't know why my gut is telling me to do something, or what I like and dislike. But
yeah.
That's what Jesse's here
And
for.
well, yeah, and anyone who's then trying to take that information and make an informed judgment off of that, they can struggle, because they don't know exactly, where that rationale is coming from, right?
I have to give people who deal with the human psyche major kudos, because I don't know if I could ever truly understand it or even begin to grasp it. So just understanding how people work and those basic mechanics, like that's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big topic, and it's a big issue in the Leave No Trace world as well. It's a lot of the type of research that our organization is doing too is even more focused in that social science world than the natural sciences at this point, because like you said, how do people think about these things? That's almost the hardest question to answer.
Yeah. I sat in on a conference, and there were a few BLM reps there, and they were talking about how the biggest audience to reach out to, in their opinion, is the next generation. And so they created they called it a spokes pebble. So kind of like Smokey the Bear. It's a pebble that communicates to children.
I think we've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought that was a great idea. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
Similar lines.
Definitely.
And to that, did you get your degree intending to go work for Leave No Trace, or did you get the degree and Leave No Trace fell after? And at what point did you two meet and start working together?
Yeah, that's a great question. To quickly answer, no, I never thought this is where I would be working. So Elena and I actually met about a year or so, or maybe a little bit less than a year before we started working for Leave No Trace. At the time, I was working on aforementioned PhD. Elena was in grad school as well. We were both at University of Michigan up in Ann Arbor. And We were actually, this is kind of funny because this is a really full circle moment. We were out in Bend, Oregon on a ski trip, which is exactly where we are right now. And unfortunately, I think Elena had come down with COVID. So we were suddenly quarantined at a friend's house for an extra week or so until Elena could pass a COVID test and we could go home. So we were kind of looking for things to do, and Elena found on Instagram. There's actually, if you're familiar with Patagonia,
A drag
yeah,
personality.
an
No
outdoor
idea who
drag
that is, but it's
personality.
great.
They're really awesome. They had posted a job board about environmental outdoor careers that Elena happened to stumble on, and we were looking for stuff to do. And basically, what this job was calling for was almost like, I like to equate it to more of a reality show application, where they're asking you to film a video of yourself, like kind of talking. And this was a two-person job. You had to apply together as a pair. So we were like, well, we're here for a week. Why not like just make a fun video and send it in and totally forget about it, which is exactly what we did. Until about a month later, we get a call to do an interview. And then very shortly after that, a job offer, which is something that we had never actually considered as a possibility when we were applying, and then had to suddenly scramble and think, okay, my timeline, especially Elena was graduating, but I was expecting to be in school for another year at minimum to finish my PhD. So it was a big sudden scramble to see if this was actually going to be possible for us, which ultimately ended up having me essentially finish writing my dissertation in a tent for half of the summer, as we kind of started this job before I actually finished school here. So it was a very hectic part of our travels and experience too.
Interesting. It sounds like it. And you just mentioned that she graduated as well. Elena, what did you graduate with? Because I'm not a doctor either, so let's not discount the people who aren't PhD.
Oh yeah, representing all of us other folks. I went to Michigan for my master's in environmental science. So I graduated with a degree in sustainable systems and conservation ecology. And I did my undergrad in biosystems engineering. And I had always been sustainability oriented and wanted to do something that had to do with the outdoors. So this was a kind of like a perfect job for my background. But we found out as we went on that the kind of duality of me bringing the ecosystem science background and Jesse bringing more of that psychology communications background made for a really great traveling team.
Interesting. So this was kind of kismet. This was all meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way.
And they give you a wilderness edition Subaru to drive around, which isn't bad either, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a perk of the job, is the old gear that you're outfitted with, including the Subaru.
Wait, is it still Subaru's or is it actually yours, gifted to you?
It is still Subarus, so they
But we
are.
have made it our
Yeah.
own. So we live in it full time and have built out a storage system that is our house. So we have our personal sides of the Subaru, and then our kitchen and our pantry and bedroom area coming out of the back of the car. And we have a cargo box and a rooftop tent on top, which really makes the whole package very livable.
It sounds like it. Do you use a Tepui?
Yes.
Yes.
I am like 0 for 3 on pronunciations today. This is terrible.
No worries. That's one
Um,
of the tougher ones there.
so y'all live out of your Subaru basically. How many days out of the year are you on the road versus it looks like you're at least a stationary point right now at home.
Yeah, we are staying with friends right now, but we camp about 60 to 70% of the time. And when applying to this job, part of the description is be prepared to camp 200 nights of the year. And so that's kind of our rough estimate of how often we're in the rooftop tent or in a ground tent as our kind of backup sleeping situation.
And we're generally not in the same location for more than a couple days. A full week in an area is like an eternity for us. We're always kind of moving to new places. We drive at least a couple hours usually every single day to try to, get across the country, because we really have been almost everywhere in the U.S. in these past 2 years.
Okay. Does LNT give you like a circuit to complete, or you just kind of make your own path? How does that look?
Yeah, no, luckily we have a fantastic manager who basically schedules all of our events for us. And so how the job works is you're given a calendar of events that are in different areas. Generally, they're designed to be not, super crazy. So it's not like we're, driving over to New York tomorrow and then back to California the next day. We're kind of try to stick in a singular region as much as we can. But our manager, Selena, schedules our events, and it's kind of up to us to be there at those times. But kind of in between those events, that's kind of more up to us to figure out what we want to do and what adventures we want to go on.
Oh, that's so great. I feel like if I read must be willing to camp 200 days or more in a job description, I wouldn't even look at the salary. I would just apply to it.
Yeah. You also, it's a pro and a con. We're always on the job in the sense that we are representing the organization and Subaru as well when we're traveling around. And so we have amazing conversations with people who simply just walk up to the car and admire it from afar and start to get the confidence to ask us what we're all about.
Yeah, we're not very subtle when we're driving around.
Yeah.
A lot of gas station conversations for sure.
Right. We love to tell stories, and we love to get people excited about the kind of education work that we do and get people as involved as possible, because we're always talking with new people and working with new people. And so we also have to be very flexible in our schedules and ready for any sort of inclement weather or change of plans. And we kind of just are flying by the seat of our pants sometimes.
Yeah, I think we've kept in almost every type of weather imaginable at this point.
Do you keep like videos or like vlogs or anything about this?
Elena writes a blog about it, about some of our stories, and we do film a lot of stuff. We have a lot of just in our own personal social medias. But Elena's blog is probably the most formal place we share these stories.
Yeah, those are kind of the inside scoop to our daily life as traveling trainers. The blog is called The Water Hole, but we also share all of the videography and photography that we're doing on the road through the Leave No Trace social media. So the Instagram, and we're TikTokers, as well as Facebook and LinkedIn.
Yeah, so as many teachable moments as we can share. That's always a great thing to put on.
That's awesome. And definitely there's a social media component because of the climate that we live in. But I appreciate that you're doing this one-on-one and talking to folks at gas stations too, because that's really how things sink home. That's where the impressions happen. It's not on social media half the time.
Yeah. We have research that shows that, the most effective communication is always going to be through that, face to face, like you said. So, not only is this something that you kind of just feel in your gut, but there is the science to back that up as well. And it's true, it's not just about raw information. It's about putting a face to it. It's about having a friendly conversation, a good experience when you're learning about that, sharing your own experiences as well, and having it be that kind of collaborative conversation. And all those things, when they're combined together, that's when you can really start to see people, adjusting their mindset on things or changing their behaviors out there.
Yeah. And I definitely know that some folks, like I know a guy, I'm in college right now, and he works for the Forest Service, and he has like great experiences like what y'all are talking about. And sometimes he'll go to an alpine lake. It's definitely above 10,000 feet, so you're not supposed to have fires at that elevation. And he'll go and do the rounds, like, everybody kick out your fires, put them out, and he'll come back an hour later and they're all relit. So there has to be some frustration involved too. Do y'all ever experience any frustrating scenarios in person?
We do, and we also experience them a lot secondhand because we do work with so many land managers, and we do see it's very easy to get jaded in this role, because you start to feel like you're the only person trying to enforce the rules out there, and it's really tough. I think we always try to encourage people to think about the moments that stand out to you oftentimes are those bad moments, and it's those people who are doing the wrong thing, and the people who are doing the right thing, most often you don't even notice them out there, and that's actually happening so many times. And there are so many people out there who are doing the right thing. We just don't celebrate that or make note of that as much, and that can really shape kind of your psyche out there, and ultimately for the negative, because once you do start feeling kind of jaded, and that's when you start becoming much less effective as a communicator and as an educator out there. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle in that way.
And to that, Elena, I have a question for you. So what Jesse just expressed, did you experience that after finishing your Appalachian Trail hikes? Because what I've found is that it's type 2 fun. It sucks in the moment afterwards. I don't remember the suck during the hikes, only the highlights.
Yeah, I have some horrible stories from hiking the Appalachian Trail, where I took with a group of friends from college. We were going on a couple of their first backpacking trips ever. Myself and one of my friends who were more experienced were kind of leading the charge, and we got lost. It started snowing, and we didn't have enough, I guess, wherewithal to figure out how to get back to the trail. So we find out later that we accidentally had been following a hunting trail for miles, and it ended at a giant pine tree that had a little hunting outpost up at mid tree, and the trail just ended there, and we could not figure out how or if we should backtrack and risk missing the trail, because if we missed the trail was north of us. North of that was just cliffy wilderness, according to our maps. And so our group decided to bushwhack through the forest to a road that was south of us. And we hit just unmanageable rhododendron that we had everyone take off their backpacks and shove them horizontally through, and then climb horizontally after them. And then we hit cliffs that were at maybe 60, 70-degree angles, and everyone was shimming down. And we finally made it to this road, and the road was closed to cars, and we laid in the middle of the road. We were so happy to finally know where we were and how to get back to the car. We might have scared a couple of people off from ever backpacking again, but that was one of my favorite backpacking trips that I've ever done, because we as a group collectively conquered this kind of experience of getting lost, and we learned a lot from it too, as to how and why it's important to have backup plans, and be a little bit more conscious about bringing extra supplies, know the weather, and also the ability of your group as well, so that you're checking in and making sure that everyone's okay. But we really bonded, and it was I tell this story to everyone who's a little anxious about getting into backpacking or even just exploring kind of a new hobby, because that was a situation where everything went wrong, it felt like, but everyone had a good time, and we came out alive and happy, and we had a great meal afterwards.
I think you relish those type 2 fun situations.
Really what we remember.
I feel like everything only goes wrong if everybody dies in the end. So like there's one thing that didn't go wrong. You all survive. Have you ever heard of rhododendron hell before?
God.
No.
Like, so this could or could not be a real thing, but I'm listening to the Outlander audiobooks and they pull a lot of like factual comments and toss them in there. And they were talking about rhododendron hell and how those groves can grow so densely that you can't find your way out of them if they're large enough. So I'm glad that you were able to survive the rhododendrons.
Oh my goodness, me too. Wow. Yeah, they grow thick.
Would you say
and
you were in hell at
it-
that time?
Yes, I was having a great time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, we can do
Just
it.
all those poor beginners you were dragging along.
But yeah, they grow so thick, at least in the area that we were, it kind of feels like nighttime. Like there's not much sunlight that gets to the bottom of the forest floor. So I can understand the concept of rhododendron hell.
And therein lies the crazy biodiversity of the Appalachian Trail. Compared to like the PCT, which is a little bit less diverse, but still they're all beautiful in their own way.
Yeah, the PCT is on my list. I'd love to find a time to through hike the PCT at some point, maybe after this job.
If you ever have any questions, we did it in 22 and we're happy to talk about it. We'll just get some more beers and just talk over the phone if you want to.
Sounds good.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good resource.
Okay, so the meat of Leave No Trace, LNT. There are 7 core principles. Let me list them off real quick, and then I would like y'all to go into some deep, dark detail, if you don't mind. So we've got plan ahead and prepare, travel and camp on durable surfaces. I think a lot of us break that one. We have dispose of waste properly. That is also another one that a lot of us probably shy away from sometimes. Leave what you find. Minimize campfire impacts. Respect wildlife and be considerate of others. All right, so I have done my due diligence in listing the 7 principles. Would you please tell us more about each of those, just starting with A all the way through G?
Sure. And I think the first, like, all important thing to understand about the 7 principles and Leave No Trace in general is that Leave No Trace is not a binary black and white. You either did it and you're great, or you mess something up and you're a horrible person, right? There's a huge gray area in all of these things, and it really depends on your own personal ethic, how you want to follow some of these things. Our hope here is to give people the information and kind of the whys surrounding these things, like why you should or should not do such a thing. And it's up to you to ultimately, adopt that ethic and make that into something that you do follow. So the first principle, like you said, plan ahead and prepare, is arguably the most important, I would say. So, Elena, do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Are you going to do these hand gestures for each one? Because I love this.
We do have hand gestures for each.
Plan ahead and prepare. We tap our head and write down our plans.
With your number 1 out there.
And this principle refers to what we pack and how we research where we're going before we arrive in that physical space. And the better we prepare, the more able we're going to be to follow the following 6 Leave No Trace principles. So we want to set ourselves up to be able to stick to the trail, know where we're going, and kind of what to expect. And the reason why our preparation is so important is because we ultimately want to have a good time, a good experience, and we don't want to put ourselves in the position of needing to be rescued, which is going to have way more impact than anything else. And if we have to involve other people to come out, if that's like bringing helicopters or even just maybe even putting the rescuers in a dangerous situation, we can avoid that by making sure that we pack. One reference that we make is to the 10 essentials of packing, and that's having a water source, food source, shelter, first aid, and then navigation, fire source, a light source, and let's see, a multi-tool, so that did I miss one?
Oh no, I wasn't counting.
We want to have all the items that we need to both set ourselves up for kind of protecting us from the what if situations. If we need to spend an extra night, then we think we'll have enough food or we'll have shelter. And if we know where we're going and know what to expect, then we should have a good time out there.
Yeah, I think the truth about Leave No Trace, and that some people might not like to hear, is that 90% of the work is done at home before you're in the outdoors, before you're on your trip. It's really, if you're doing the right research, if you look up the place, know what the regulations are going to be, and if you pack the right stuff, you're going to be in a pretty darn good spot to leave no trace afterwards. And if you're not doing that, you're not putting in that work, not doing the homework, then that's when you're going to find yourself in those spots where you are most likely violating some other sort of principle out there, unfortunately.
Most likely. Do you cater your communications to an avid backpacking audience or kind of just the layman?
So we used to, I would say, cater more towards the avid backpacker. I mean, that's kind of how the Leave No Trace ethics were developed. The reality is that's not always the most important audience to reach. Sometimes it's more important to reach that like more beginner backpacker or just a casual recreationist. So someone who is, getting out for the first time. That's where a lot of times this information is going the farthest, and is most needed. And so we have tried to, as much as we can, start shifting our language towards making it a little bit more accessible. And there's so many ways that the outdoors can be, intimidating or daunting, and even down to things like the amount of jargon that we say in all of our talking about the outdoors. And people don't know half the words you're talking about, and they're a little bit unsure to ask you. So, we have gone through all of our materials in the past couple of years, and it's still an ongoing process of trying to, take a step back, look at this from the perspective of someone who's not necessarily that like lifelong outdoor, backpacker, and someone who's really getting out there. And what are these things that we're saying that might not make sense to them? How can we make this more personally applicable to you for the first time? And I think that's where a lot of the boatload of the work is going in Leave No Trace.
So a lot of people got outside during the 2019-2020 pandemic. Have you seen big jumps in, I guess, attendances, not even for national parks, but for BLM and just outdoor spaces in general?
Yeah, we absolutely have. And I think, there might have, in this past year, I think there was finally a little bit of a dip out there, but it generally has been trending upwards. It's something that we see not only in the land itself, but also in how exhausted some land managers are becoming from it, and how much work people are going through, and how much kind of new situations they're finding themselves in that are problems that they never expected to come up. And it can definitely be overwhelming. The positive is there's, a lot of new people, a lot of new minds that are open to be molded, and a lot of new potential stewards that if we can make that message accessible to them, they can then be potential champions of, forwarding that Leave No Trace message as well.
Many people discovered the outdoors as that safe space during the pandemic, a place to kind of experience lower population. And then they've been returning. And we've also seen a lot of people finding out about the outdoors through social media, especially after the pandemic. And so more and more people are traveling to kind of these beautiful, picturesque, iconic places. And they are the audience that we really, really want to reach with not only those beautiful pictures, but also the important information that helps them plan for an experience in that spot.
Yeah. So when we're talking about, principle 1, plan ahead and prepare, and doing your research, what that research has shifted in the past couple of years, and how people are doing research has really changed. And when you're working with federal, state land management agencies, those are going to be the places that are sometimes the slowest to react to those lightning quick changes. So that's where a big challenge definitely is coming. And it's kind of a big fight of ours to, try to modernize how we are sharing that information so that the people who are doing their research on TikTok are still able to get those, the right information, not just see the beautiful sunset, or they're seeing the realities of the space, they're understanding the challenges. But we are still seeing lots of places where, there are, a popular spot has been discovered on TikTok. It's, actually a super high elevation area. It's not like a picnic spot, but that's not how people are seeing it online, and they're bringing their families up and they're having to be rescued, having to bring out helicopters to get them down. And that is happening all the time. So it's really, social media, right? It's a Pandora's box. It's not something that we can just avoid. It's something that we ultimately do have to be active participants in if we do want to see change. So it's not just up to management agencies to be better on that. It's up to everyone to kind of build those communities on there and keep contributing as much as we can. And it's tough because a lot of times the people who are most passionate about the outdoors are the ones who are the least passionate about the online world. And so it's definitely it's something that it's a hard sell to some folks, but it's something that I do think we as an organization think is very important.
I can say this because I'm not representing LNT, but I find it hilarious and also terrible that people were rescued off of Mount Quandary, and they were having to be rescued by SAR because they would post hole and their shoes would freeze in the snow and they would be stranded shoeless. And so they were having to be stranded for reasons like that. Just take the proper footwear and do the research before you go out there.
Right.
Yeah. And that's shared often through social media, but we want to normalize incorporating where the bathrooms are going to be at the trail, or if there are even bathrooms. And also one big thing is like, what does the parking situation look like? And can we go at a less trafficked time? And how do we pack out our trash from a certain spot? Are there trash cans, or do we need to make sure to bring everything back home with us? And knowing that before we get there really sets people up to completely minimize their impacts when they're there.
Yeah. There's been a really interesting dialogue that we've kind of been hearing echoed across a lot of different places in the country about kind of like this idea of almost a sacrificial site. So there are some, different areas, different lands are designed to be used differently. Some are designed to be, very popular, very, accessible. Some are designed to be less so. And so some land management agencies that we've talked to have taken the stance of saying, well, we know that there's a lot of issues happening at this one site, but as long as we can contain them to this one site, that's a win in our books. And, I'm not sure whether that's, the right solution or not. It's an interesting approach for sure. And it's something that we're kind of seeing develop, but, there's just so many people getting out there, and it's so hard to get them the right information before they go out there. And sometimes, if you're able to have interpretive rangers or anyone at this kind of sacrificial site and be there educating people, maybe in the future, in their next trip, they'll be more prepared to get out there as well. So it's definitely a puzzle.
Yeah, it is.
It's a wicked problem, so to speak.
A wicked problem. I had to do a paper on some XYZ topic, and I chose a paper called Marmots Don't Drink Coffee. And it was talking about urination and excretion issues over in Rocky Mountain National Park and all the nitrogen in the soils. And I'm like, well, that feels like a sacrificial area to me, because you can only do so much with that volume of visitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And back to what you were saying about stewards. So I've been looking into traditional ecological knowledge a bit lately, and I keep seeing mentioned that the word steward implies dominion over, whereas being a part of and just part of the whole web in general is kind of a better way to phrase it. What do you think about that?
That's a really interesting topic. I do think, especially when you're looking back at like more traditional indigenous ways of land management and having a relationship with the land. That is something that we are doing our best to kind of catch up on and be more at the forefront and be incorporating those, because so much of our traditional kind of outdoorist ideals have come from that idea of, we are here to conquer nature and kind of mold it to our dominion and to our will, and we want to protect it, but it's up to us to kind of decide how that is. And I think that does seem to be a bit of an outdated way of thinking about these things. I think, I'm actually not the biggest fan of the word steward personally. I do think it's one of those maybe jargony words too, that's just like a little bit too not. So if you have a better word for, we want to have or redefine exactly what we want people to be, it's someone who feels interconnected with their world, understands, actions and impacts and how those things relate. But maybe isn't someone who is, controlling the world. I don't know. What do you think about that, Elena?
Yeah, it's hard too, because we reference conservation a lot.
Yeah, another one.
And that's also a jargony word, and it implies to other people that we are kind of removing things from our own access. We're like protecting nature from ourselves, and it feels like we're restricting ourselves, which a lot of people have a hard time kind of fathoming, especially with the reach that our societies have on nature and the way that we use it. And the indigenous knowledge is really a part of the whole ecosystem. It's like we talk about like an egocentric perspective or point of view, where we are not the most important creatures out there, but rather we rely on all the functions of nature so deeply. But because we buy our food in the grocery store and because we live in houses, we largely forget that even like the outdoors is the home of so much wildlife that is important in and of itself. And we might be able to connect to it by talking about how it's important to us, but it is a whole nother step to take to realize that these are amazing creatures, and this is a very complicated and incredible ecological system that we live in and among.
Yeah. I heard a great phrase. I heard the phrase kin-centric. So treating nature and every component of nature and even your fellow man as your relative instead of a resource. Because there are all these natural resources that we utilize, and nature is a carbon sink to stop global warming. And we look at it as like this tool that we use or this resource that we take from. But if it was more of like our distant cousin or our brother or our immediate family, like we would care for it better. So I love that concept. But to what you said, Jesse, I don't have a good phrase or a good word for this. I don't know. Maybe integral part instead of steward. I don't know.
That's a tough one. We need to invent a new word, I think, for it.
Yeah. All right. Big rabbit hole. Next one. Travel and camp on durable surfaces.
The whole goal of traveling and camping on durable surfaces is to minimize the compression and the destruction of the plants and the soil underneath our feet and underneath our tents, so that it can either stay in the kind of quality or remain in the quality that it was in before we arrived there, or recover fast enough that nobody ever knew that we were there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's ultimately, really easy to create new trails or create new permanent campsites. I think the statistic is something like 25 passes is all it takes to create a new permanent social trail. A social trail being like an unofficial trail. And so, if you're out there with your group of 12 friends or whatever, and you go off the trail once and then walk back on the same path, that's already enough to make a new trail. And trails are, if we think about it, trails are how we concentrate our usage, right? It's how we make sure that all this nature is still being able to be pristine around us, and we have this kind of sacrificial area like we were talking about, but it's constrained to this, single line where we are impacting it, but we're just trying to minimize that. And so the more like unofficial trails that are created, the less we're concentrating that usage efficiently. And something like a social trail or like unofficial trails are really tough, because even people who are, conscious about these things and are trying to not go off trails, once there are these kind of newly created trails, it's not a simple thing always to determine which is the official trail and what I should be walking on out there. So it's kind of putting people in that situation that even if I'm knowledgeable, even if I have the ethic to try to stay on trail, I'm somehow not able to do that. So that it's a tricky one. And same for camping. I think, how many nights in the same spot before? Three nights in the same spot with your tent. That'll kind of create a permanent, like identifiable
Evidence
site.
That
Yeah.
tent
So it's
being there.
yeah, it's really quick that you can actually kind of create these permanent marks. And so it definitely takes that conscious, okay, we're going to move our site every couple nights, even if we're staying here for a week. And it's definitely an added challenge to do these things.
So the way that we travel and camp on durable surfaces is by sticking on surfaces that are either resistant or resilient to us watching, or to us walking or camping on them. And so the resistant surfaces are things that are already hard and durable. That's rock or a platform, a boardwalk, the trail, a sidewalk are all resistant surfaces. They're not going to change in physical form very much at all by us walking on them. And resilient surfaces are things that primarily vegetation that can recover pretty quickly from us walking on them. And the thing that we point to the most is dry grass in like kind of grassland ecosystems. If we are walking on dry grass, it'll bounce back up after we walk on it. And dry grass is going to be more resilient compared to wet grass, which if we walk on it, it's a lot easier to tear up those roots and prevent it from being able to bounce back. And things like wildflowers or other vegetation that if we camp on it or crush it somehow, it's disrupting its life cycle enough that it's not going to be able to easily grow back. We want to try and avoid those areas as much as possible.
Got you. And does that also involve setbacks from watersheds? Is that figured into the durable surfaces?
Yeah, that was kind of incorporated in a couple of the other, I would say even more the respect wildlife principle and disposing of our waste
I
properly.
think, ultimately all these principles are kind of artificial lines that we've drawn in the sand. All these things are definitely connected to each other. So, when you want to be, at least 200 feet away from a watershed, when you're camping, that's primarily to allow, wildlife easy access to that. So you are respecting wildlife, but it's also...
Well, unfortunately, that is all you're going to get for this episode. This is just the first part of our interview with Leave No Trace and Jesse and Elena. I don't know about you, but I nerd out whenever we start talking science and the reasons behind Leave No Trace and the functionality and the practicality of it as well. I just love this stuff, and I hope you do as well. And hopefully, while we're entertaining all of you, you're also getting a little bit of education on Leave No Trace practices and the rationale, if you didn't already know it. If you did, you're amazing. Expect the next part to come out next week. And unfortunately, Basecamp will still not be in that episode because this was recorded about a month ago. I know. It's sad to not have Basecamp in here because she adds a lovely element to the episode that I can't quite add to it. So she will be back in coming episodes after Leave No Trace, but stay tuned for next week's installment. At this point in the episode, I want to give a huge shout out to our intro and outro track artist, The Fire Once Lost, who now has not one but 2 new songs out. Go check them out on Spotify or wherever you listen to your music. You can find the socials to The Fire Once Lost and the show notes for this episode and every episode that starts and ends with The Fire Once Lost music. We really appreciate you and love the vibe. The song that we use for our track is called Appalachian Trail. It's just a nice, mellow instrumental that we feel suits the podcast really well. If you want to know anything else about us, about the artists that we use for intro outro, if you want to ask us questions, leave feedback, etc., you can reach out to us on our Instagram, which is just the name of our podcast. That's our handle, at Yeti Walks Into Basecamp. Or you can reach out to us via our email, which is the name of our podcast, at gmail.com. So that's Yeti Walks Into Basecamp at gmail.com. Well, I guess this is going to be a little bit weird to hear coming from just me, but the show must go on. And you know what they like to say in the hiking community, right? Happy trails.